What's up guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg, and today we're taking a look at the brand new iPad Pro. So we have the 10.5 inch and the 12.9 inch, two different sizes but very similar specs, and we're going to compare them side by side. Now the big news is the 10.5 inch, which is an all new iPad replacing the 9.7 inch, while the 12.9 inch for the most part is a spec upgrade. In terms of pricing, the 10.5 inch starts off at a fairly high $649, while the 12.9 inch starts off at $799. So there is a price increase for the smaller model. Of course, there's three different capacity options to pick from. 64 is standard, but you can go all the way up to 512 gigs of storage. And if you add cellular data, which is another $129, you can max out the price of the full-size iPad Pro to $1,229, so that's quite expensive. Once again, the smaller iPad Pro is available in 4 colors, which includes rose gold, while the larger iPad Pro goes without rose gold. Now, there is a different wallpaper for each color, but they're not applied by default, so you'll actually have to pick them under the wallpaper settings to apply them to your home screen. So let's start with the 10.5 inch model. So all we have to do is lift up the lid, and the first thing we'll see is our tablet wrapped in lots of frosty plastic. We can go ahead and peel this off, and the design here is pretty familiar, but before we take a close look, let's get to the accessories. First up, we have a USB lightning cable, which is pretty standard. Of course, we have a packet with some paperwork that includes a quick start guide, warranty info, a set of white Apple stickers, and a SIM ejection tool, which is unique to the cellular model. Also underneath that is the power adapter wrapped in plastic, and it looks like they sort of redesigned the plastic wrapper so the prongs don't scratch anything, so there's some protectors over it. So that's just a very minor detail, but once again, it's 12 watts. Now getting to the very large 12.9 inch model, is basically the same unboxing, just scaled up to size. So of course we have our tablet wrapped in plastic, and peeling that off you can see it's a little noisier, and then we can go ahead and set that aside and take a closer look in just a bit. The accessories are identical, they're exactly the same. That includes the 12 watt power adapter. It would be nice to have a bigger power adapter for the larger battery. So side by side, the 10.5 inch does have a noticeably smaller bezel compared to the 12.9 inch, which is pretty much carried over from the previous generation. Now in terms of the screen, both of them have the same pixel count, 264 ppi, and to achieve that they do have different screen resolutions. For the 10.5 inch, it's bigger than the 9.7 inch. It's up to 2224 by 1668, while the 12.9 inch is once again at 2732 by 2048. Now, both of these are extremely bright displays that support the wide color gamut of the DCI-P3 standard. They're also true tone displays, so it adapts the color of the display for the ambient light, so it sort of reflects the conditions of the room. But new for both of these displays is ProMotion technology, which means that they can refresh up to 120 Hz, which means that the interface looks extremely fast and silky, and it's impossible to illustrate this on the camera because the camera is only running at 30 frames per second. So basically this is 120 frames per second at maximum, but it is adaptive. So it really depends on what content you're looking at. So video won't look 120 frames per second, but the interface or the UI will adapt to 120 Hertz. So it looks extremely fast and responsive, and it definitely makes a big difference. It's unlike any other tablet I've ever used. The iPad Pros are still the only tablets that work with Apple's Pencil, and in this case, ProMotion is part of improving the input latency of the Apple Pencil. So according to Apple, with ProMotion, the input lag is the lowest in the industry. Both of these displays are once again fully laminated to the glass, and the glass is anti-reflective, so it's able to reject as much glare as possible, but it's not completely perfect. Although this is still a mechanical home button, we do get Touch ID 2 for the first time, so it's twice as fast as the previous generation, and of course it still works with things like Apple Pay and unlocking the iPad. Toward the top, in addition to an ambient light sensor, is the same 7 megapixel FaceTime HD camera from the iPhone 7, which is capable of 1080p HD video, the Retina flash for flashing the screen for lighting up your face, and an f2.2 aperture. Speaking of the iPhone 7, we have the same iSight camera on the back as well, 12 megapixels with an f1.8 aperture, 4K video recording, and optical image stabilization. They even borrowed the iPhone 7's quad LED True Tone flash. Although we have the exact same cameras on both of these iPads, the one on the 10.5 inch does stick out quite a bit more. That's probably because it's a bit thinner, and of course the bezels are smaller, so they had to make more room for the camera. Now the lenses are covered in sapphire glass, so they won't scratch too easily, and because the iPads are so big, they don't rock when you're using it on a flat surface. Now because this is the same camera in the iPhone 7, my review from the iPhone 7 basically applies to the iPad Pro. We have all the same features and technologies. We have the same 12 megapixel sensor with an f1.8 aperture, so we have a nice shallow depth of field. It also lets a lot of light into the camera for good low light sensitivity. We also have optical image stabilization for the first time, which is great for 4K video recording. We also have focus pixels for improved autofocus performance and much more. In terms of buttons, they're keeping it pretty basic. We have a sleep-wake power button toward the top and our volume controls on the side. Now, because I have the LTE version, you'll see these little stripes along the back, very similar to the iPhone. This is part of the antenna system. Also toward the center is a set of dual microphones. Now, carried over from the previous generation is a set of quad speakers. We'll find 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom, and again, they're in the same position as before. Now, these speakers are designed to be adaptive, so no matter how you're holding the tablet, this will adjust the speaker output for left and right or up and down. Now, just like the previous generation, the audio output on these tablets is really impressive, so let's go and take a listen.
What's up, guys? This is Mike, the Detroit Borg, and Apple has finally updated the iMac. So they haven't touched this since late 2015, and in this video, we're going to take a look at the 21.5-inch 4K model.
In terms of the Lightning connector, both of them now get the USB 3 spec for faster charging and transfer speeds. Toward the bottom edge on the right side, we have our Nano SIM tray, but the great thing about the iPad Pro is that it does have an embedded SIM, so you can just sign up for your service without having to install a SIM from your carrier. But if it doesn't support the embedded SIM, of course you can install your own. Another feature unique to the iPad Pro is the Smart Connector, which provides both power and data connectivity to accessories like the keyboard. And of course, there's lots of magnets built into the side of the iPad for connecting those accessories. Now, according to Apple, one of the reasons they increased the standard size of the iPad to 10.5 inches is that it gives us room for a bigger keyboard. So that includes the on-screen keyboard and the physical connected keyboard that's available for the iPad Pro. In fact, if you look at them side by side, it looks like they basically drag the corner of the old keyboard to expand it out. So we get larger keys, a wider footprint, and it feels much more conventional to use and definitely a lot more comfortable. Now, if you look at the software keyboards between the 10.5 inch and 12.9 inch, you can see there's a pretty big difference here. Obviously, much more compact on the smaller iPad compared to the full number row on the 12.9 inch, in addition to all of the characters and functions along the sides. But basically, it looks like they sort of cropped those off on the 10.5 inch, so at least the letters are roughly the size of a conventional keyboard. So this does make typing on the 10.5 inch screen feel a lot more natural. So when it comes to specs, they make it pretty easy to choose between them because they're identical. We have the A10X Fusion processor, which is a variation of the iPhone 7 CPU. This is the most powerful iOS processor you can buy. We also get 4 gigs of RAM in each of them, so our Geekbench scores are identical, or relatively identical. Now, if you compare this to the previous generation, obviously there's a pretty significant gain here, but the previous generation also had different specs, so they weren't quite lined up, but now everything is equal. Because we have 2 different screen sizes, we do get 2 different battery sizes to achieve the same battery life for both, so about 10 hours of general purpose use for web browsing and watching videos. In terms of the 10.5 inch, we have a 30.4 watt-hour battery and a 41 watt-hour battery in the 12.9 inch. So of course that does mean the 12.9 inch is noticeably heavier at about 1.49 pounds versus a little over 1 pound for the 10.5 inch. Comparing the 10.5 to the previous 9.7 inch model, obviously the big difference here is that the new one is bigger overall, but the bezels are smaller, so it's not quite as big as it could have gotten. Now the bezels seem to be just about the right size, so if you look at the home button, there is just enough room for it and nothing else. The chassis has been redesigned, but really it's just been scaled up to the new model, but of course there's a lot of differences here. So for example, the antenna has been redesigned. It's not as tall as it used to be and it's more rounded. The camera module is different. It's quite a bit bigger than the old model, but it still sticks out about the same. The microphones have moved from around the camera to the center top, and the speakers have been sort of tweaked for the new size. Now, when it comes to the 12.9 inch model, the changes are a bit bigger. So for example, we have the new P3 display for the first time on this size. So it's a much brighter display, much more vibrant. And of course, we have all the other benefits of the latest technology like ProMotion and more. So it's a much better looking display than before. In terms of the chassis, even though it's the same dimensions, it has been completely redesigned. So for example, the antenna strip on the back has been reduced significantly. They've sort of rearranged the speakers for the new design. And of course, the camera is a big difference here. We have a much better camera than the 8 megapixel camera that came before, and it does stick out quite a bit as opposed to the flush design. We also get an LED flash, which we didn't have before, and the microphones have once again been relocated. So that means the existing keyboard and smart cover will work with the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, but the silicone case no longer does. So when it comes to choosing between these two tablets, it really comes down to two factors: price and size. Obviously, there's a pretty big price gap between these, but the size difference is also significant. I think the 12.9-inch is quite a bit bulkier and heavier, so I think it's better suited toward a laptop experience. It's not as comfortable to use as a tablet, while the 10.5-inch is very nice and compact, so it makes it great for tablet usage, but maybe not the best for a keyboard experience. Now, the iPad Pro definitely does a very good job distinguishing itself from its MacBook cousins. Of course, there's a lot of features here which MacBooks don't have, such as a full touchscreen, the Pro Motion feature, which makes a huge impact. We have Touch ID built in standard, and at 600 nits, this is brighter than any of the Mac displays, which makes it better for outdoor visibility. Of course, we also have a stylus if that's important to you. It's not to me, but it also has LTE, which is something no MacBook has right now. And it's a very powerful machine with the A10 CPU, certainly more powerful than I need for day-to-day tasks. Of course, there is a big difference when it comes to the operating system. For the most part, it's carried over here, but there is a major change coming with iOS 11 later this year. So if you guys want to check that out, I'll leave that linked in the description below. So in the end, I really like these tablets, especially because it gives you a technology you can't get anywhere else, and that is that high refresh rate. That makes a big difference. It's sort of like the difference between a Retina display and a non-Retina display. Once you use it, you really can't go back to anything else. Alrighty guys, hope you enjoyed this look at the iPad Pros. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up to let me know, and I'll see you again in my next video.